was at the very last observation you made, Deepak, that the word love finally came in. And it's been my journey to learn to come to a new kind of love in my life. I have been reading a great teacher from Bulgaria whose name was Peter Dunov, of whom Einstein said at the height of his popularity back in the 30s that the whole world bows before me and I bow before Peter Dunov. Peter Dunov was a man who talked about a different kind of love. He said there are basically three kinds of love. One is human love. And human love is a love that changes and varies. So this is a love that I love you, but you came home late and you forgot Valentine's Day, so I don't love you so much. And it's constantly changing. I love you, I hate you, and on it goes. And then there's a love that he called spiritual love, which is a love that never changes, but it does vary. This is the love that I can only define as the love I have for my children. I have 8 of them, and it really doesn't matter what they do or how they behave, how they conduct themselves. The love is just there. I'm sure the people who've committed some of these atrocities that we've been experiencing the last few months here in America, the mothers of these people still love them. Having 8 children, I know that it varies. Sometimes it's a little stronger than others, but it's always there. And I'm sure you know that with your children, and I see Rita there as we were talking about her children. Your children. And then there's a love that Peter Dunov spoke about, which is a love that he calls divine love. And this is a love that never changes. And this is a love that never varies. And this is a love I aspire to. And the only way I can describe it, it's in the Gospel of Thomas, in the Nag Hammadi scrolls that were found in 1945, Jesus is quoted as saying that when you make the two one, then you can enter the kingdom. And the opening line of the Tao Te Ching, a book that I studied and lived and wrote a whole series of essays about, the opening line of the Tao says, "The Tao that can be named is not the Tao." And so I try to imagine a love that Jesus spoke about when you take the two and make it one. So this is a love that has no opposites. So if I were to ask you the word, if I said, what is joy? I'm going to say, what is the opposite of joy? Most of you would probably say something like despair or sadness and so on. And if I ask you to imagine a joy that has no opposite, it's just joy. Or if I were to ask you, what's the opposite of love? We could come up with many antonyms to love. Try to imagine a love that has no opposite. That's all there is. Nothing else can come up. It's, I was thinking when Eckhart was speaking about what is it in us that, you talk about happiness. And I was thinking, I don't use the word happy either. Shakespeare, in one of his plays, said, I think he said it this way, my crown is in my heart, not on my head, not decked with diamonds, nor Indian stones, nor to be seen. My crown is called content. A crown it is that seldom kings enjoy. And that kind of love is the love I aspire to. Contentment, a love that knows no opposite. Now, we're talking up here about being human, and of course, we're all in human bodies, and making the two one is almost impossible for us. There's a woman here in the audience who I didn't even know yesterday that I was going to be here today. I just happened to be staying at a hotel nearby. I'm going to see my publisher tomorrow to do some recording, and then I'm going to Denver to do a workshop on the weekend, a writer's workshop. And sitting next to me on the table is Eckhart Tolle, my friend, a man whom I've done a program with recently called The Importance of Being Extraordinary. And of course, to my left is a man who we call each other brothers. We've loved each other very, very much since the early 1990s. Like, I think it was 1990. So the idea that I was going to be here, I didn't even know this was going on. And, and Eckhart said, why don't you come? And here I am. And when I walked in, someone else walked up to me and said, Wayne, what are you doing here? And her name is Anita Moorjani. Stand up, Anita. Where are you, dear? Right over here. And Anita, I have written a foreword to a book that of hers called Dying to Be Me. And she, I think she's speaking here. Are you speaking here tomorrow? On Friday here at the Chopra Center? Right, right. So Anita has described what it was like. I mean, she had end-stage lymphoma cancer for 5 years, was down to 82 pounds, had tumors the size of lemons throughout her entire body, and only had a few hours left to live. And became an observer and watched this whole process. And I saw something about her experience on the internet and located her in Hong Kong. She happened to be in Dubai when I found her, and I asked her if she would write her story. And she wrote her story and sent it to me to see if we could publish it. And I sent it back to her and said, it isn't good enough. I want you to go back to the state that you were in when you experienced the kind of love I'm speaking about here right now, a love that has no opposites. The words awareness have been tossed around up here, higher awareness. But in that state where there is only one, there is no opposite, whatever you place your attention on, you become. And the only thing that you can feel is a kind of unconditional love. So for me, as I aspire, it is to live a love that has no judgment, no criticism, no condemnation towards any of God's creations. And if we can get to that place, and while we are human, there will still always be the two. The dichotomy will always be there. There will always be the opposite. But in the world that Eckhart describes so beautifully in The Power of Now, we can do this inside here. In here, we don't have to have those judgments, those criticisms, those condemnations. And when we get to that place, because as many of you know, I was diagnosed with leukemia 3 years ago. And I had an experience of having a remote healing from John of God down in Brazil. Many of you, probably everyone in this room knows who that is. And what I thought happened is that these entities entered into my body and they just healed me of leukemia. But that isn't what happened. What happened is that these entities entered my body and they took out fear. The word leukemia is loaded with fear. It isn't about fear of dying. It's such a word. It's just cancer of the blood, everywhere going through your body. It's all of the things about cancer, the cancer that Anita spoke about so brilliantly in her revised edition of, which was done so beautifully. And so it is, I woke up the morning after I had had this remote healing from John of God, and two of my children were there with me on Maui. One of them was my daughter, and I looked at her, and I had never seen her the way I had seen her that morning. And I put my arms around her, and I just said, I just can't describe to you how much I love you. And I looked at my son, and I put my arms around him, and I looked outside. I live on the ocean. The ocean looked different. I just had never seen it before. The palm trees just looked different. The birds, the grass, every stranger that I encountered. In the Course it says there are two ways of reacting. There's love and there's fear. And everything that is love cannot be fear. And everything that is fear cannot be love. So what I would ask you to do is to ask yourself, how much of my life and the decisions that I make are based upon fear? Do you eat the foods that you eat because you're afraid that if you don't, you'll get sick? Or do you do it out of love? This is my body, this is the temple I live in, and I want to treat it that way. Do you drive the speed limit because you love everyone around you and you want them to be safe? Or do you drive the speed limit because you're afraid that if you don't, you're going to get a ticket, so you have a radar detector, and on and on and on it goes. And I could go on with these kinds of, you can almost look at almost every single thing that we do in our life, and so many of them are based on fear. And what Anita's experience was, when she was in the other realm, is that there is no such thing as fear. And cancer, and Deepak and I have done many programs on this. In fact, I remember in London at the Palladium, you and I standing up there one time asking that question, why so much cancer in our world? Why so much illness? Why so much disease? Because, you used to always say it's perfect health, that we don't, our bodies do not have to, there's nothing physically in there that says these bodies have to get older and they have to deteriorate and they even have to die. And if we could get the fear out of our hearts and just come from a place of no judgment, no criticism, no condemnation towards any of God's children, we could live what Shakespeare was speaking about. We could just be content. And that's all I have to say.